let's take a moment to remember Alabama's first female governor, Lurleen Wallace, and the odd and tragic story that surrounded her governorship. Lurleen Wallace was the wife of George Wallace, probably the most infamous of Alabama governors. George Wallace served an unprecedented 4 terms as governor of the state of Alabama. Considered a Southern neo-Dixiecrat, George Wallace is mostly remembered for his administration's strong resistance to the civil rights movement and his fight against perceived federal overreach in the integration of public schools.
For the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
Their marriage began in 1943. She was 16 and he was 24. For the next 25 years, she would stay by his side as he grew his political career. At times, she was the sole breadwinner while he ran for offices, raising 4 children along the way. By most reports, George Wallace was very much a hands-off family man, preferring to focus on his political career rather than his wife and children. Reports claim that Lurleen at least once threatened George with a divorce for his lack of responsibility to the family. But he eventually convinced her to remain, since a divorce would effectively ruin his political aspirations. In 1962, George Wallace won the governorship for the first time in Alabama. Just 9 months after his inauguration, he famously stood in the doors of the University of Alabama in an unsuccessful bid to halt its integration. In that era, governors were not allowed to serve consecutive terms. He petitioned the state legislature to take steps to change the Alabama Constitution. When they refused, he offered up his wife, Lurleen, as a surrogate candidate for office. They made no attempt to cover up the fact that George Wallace would remain the state's de facto governor, with Lurleen saying that her husband would be her #1 assistant.
My election would enable my husband to carry on his programs for the people of Alabama.
After she announced her candidacy in 1965, Lurleen was diagnosed with uterine cancer, which came as a huge shock to her, but not to her husband. According to multiple accounts, when Lurleen was giving birth to their 4th and last child, Janie Lee, in 1961, doctors discovered evidence of cancer while performing a cesarean section. In true 1960s fashion, the doctors did not inform Lurleen, instead telling George, who insisted that she not be told. As a result, Lurleen never received the follow-up care that she needed. After undergoing a hysterectomy, she won the Democratic primary in 1966, beating out a field of 9 other candidates, including 2 former governors. But her condition deteriorated quickly. After her inauguration, she had surgery in July to remove a tumor in her colon. By April of 1968, the cancer was in her liver and her lungs, and she weighed less than 80 pounds. On May 7th, Lurleen Wallace died in Montgomery, with George by her side and the rest of her family in the next room. The next day, Lurleen was laid out in the state capitol. According to some accounts, she had requested that the funeral be closed casket, but George insisted that her body be on display. A glass bubble covered her open casket as 21,000 mourners waited hours to file by her. She was interred in Greenwood Cemetery in Montgomery. In her short period as governor, Lurleen got the state legislature to pass a $15 million bond to improve mental health care facilities in the state. She also continued her husband's agenda to fight the integration of schools without success. After her death, George left the governor's mansion to live in a house they owned in Montgomery. He did not take the children, sending them to live with family and friends. He would later hold office 3 more times as governor of Alabama, including 2 consecutive terms. He would be married 2 more times, both of which would end in divorce. So that's the short, sad story of the first woman governor of the state of Alabama, Lurleen Wallace. For AL.com, I'm Ian Hoppy.